Work for it, ride for it, I'ma organize for it. Stay up in the night and in the morning, I'ma rise for it. Heart for it, mind for it, ears for it, eyes for it. Peace and a place on this earth for me and mine for it. Work for it, ride for it, I'ma organize for it. Stay up in the night and in the morning, I'ma rise for it. Heart for it, mind for it, ears for it, eyes for it. Peace and a place on this earth for me and mine for it.
Hey, peace. Thanks for tuning into the Money, Power, Land, Solidarity podcast. I'm super pleased today to be joined by the squad. I got Isaac and Deanna on the mic with me.
Hello.
Hello.
Yeah, and we have a really special guest. And I think the way I wanted to bless this episode off is like speak to all the people who were knocking on doors in the last 3 months, the people who were organizing campaigns, the people who are organizing canvases, the people who are actually writing out the messages, the people who are moving supplies around. Like what I've been wrestling a lot with the role of electoral politics and really building power, right? But one thing I think feels really tangible and I think is really real and why I really respect it is I respect people who do work, who show up and really do work. And there's like a lot of hard work put in by a lot of people behind the scenes. So I wanted to thank everybody who's listening, who is doing that type of work, and then say we're joined by somebody who's putting in mega work behind the scenes. And I'm really excited to have some reflections with, welcome to the show, Luna Zeidner.
Thanks, Jake. Yeah. Hi.
Welcome.
It's really good to be here. I've been a fan for a while, so this is a little bit shaking for me. So
That's awesome. Cool.
Yeah.
It's a pleasure to have you. Could you just maybe start by introducing yourself to our listeners and like how did you get into the position to be the campaign manager for Sheila FTP?
Well, yeah, I definitely have a pretty non-traditional path into politics. I've been very political since like I was a very young kid. Like I think I learned about what elections were in 2004. I was in second grade.
Damn.
And I, we like had the mock election in my elementary school.
Yo.
And I was like fascinated by this concept that like, oh, people choose the leader. And, like, it's like, so you can, and I didn't really understand it, but it was Bush versus Kerry, I think.
Yeah.
So yeah, and
I was a freshman in college
Whoa.
in Memphis, Tennessee.
oh God.
And I was not really tuned in like that, but I knew that I was not feeling being surrounded by a bunch of George Bush signs and Confederate flags. I transferred after a semester, partly because like it was such a polarized environment. 2004
Yeah.
presidential elections.
Yeah, I was in like the opposite. I was in Oak Park, Illinois, so right outside of Chicago. It's a very liberal bubble. A lot of like kind of academic types. A lot of very professional liberals. From my eyes, I was like, oh, I'm 8, so I only know the world like a mile around me basically. But I was like, oh, Kerry's gonna win. Democrats are super popular. And I probably picked that up because my parents thought that.
Yeah.
They were like, I'm just gonna vote for Bush after all that.
I can picture a little second grader talking about John Kerry. That's funny as hell.
So yeah.
That's like my nieces were out there like, Bernie.
Hell yeah. Well, that would be a better cause to get into. I was not into any of the candidates. I just the assignment was like, oh, go home, ask your parents like who they're voting for and what they believe in and why. And I remember my parents were like, well, the environment and a bunch of stuff that like in retrospect is really funny because now that I like know who John Kerry is and he's been through, was our Secretary of State for a while or something. So yeah, but and then to only further and make my political journey weirder, when I was 12 or 13, I started going to this summer camp in Michigan, Circle Pines Center, which I don't know if y'all have ever heard of this, but it's a cooperative, like a social cooperative in central Michigan that was started by Jewish refugees in the 30s and kind of shifted its role. So like in the 50s and 60s, it was like a place where a lot of like folk singers in the like movement were hanging out. Pete Seeger was hanging out there a lot, and it was also like kind of a place where like interracial couples could go and like be there. Like, so I think it was like always like radicals from the Chicago area when they wanted to like go out, into the kind of country, and get away from it all. They'd be going up there, and eventually it became a summer camp for young people, and I went there
That's
basically my
dope.
entire middle and high school. So I definitely got radicalized by a bunch of like Oberlin students, basically, who were camp counselors there, which was pretty funny. So
I can relate.
Yeah.
For real? Your summer camp experience also had a left politics to it?
It did, but it was also very Zionist. So like thinking about it now, it's like, because I was just remembering like, the barn at our summer camp housed a lot of guns for Israel when they were sending supplies to Israel.
Wow.
To like, yeah, I just remembered that when you're talking about like refugees and how to hold out, you know, so it's just like, oh yeah, the barn that we had like our plays in on Friday nights housed a lot of guns that were eventually confiscated because they found them, you know, they didn't actually make it to Israel, but there was like an amass weaponry for the state creation.
Yeah, that's actually wilder than anything that I ever saw happen in my life.
That's hardcore. That's hardcore. I mean, both are interesting though, because I guess what is coming to my mind right now is just what it really takes to build a movement and political infrastructure, you know. So to think about like that, those left-wing radicals and Jewish people who created that summer camp, and all of those folk singers and those commitments to political ideology and ideal, that's a fire that we carry with us today. That's really cool that they did that. And you know, movements are not all revolutionary or progressive, and sometimes they're mixed. So the idea that like, you know, that Zionism as a movement is that strong. It's like, I think it says a lot about like infrastructure and culture and multi-generational building.
Right.
That's a good, I've never even thought about it like that, but that's totally true.
Yeah.
Like a lot of the people who were sending like my peers, you know, to this camp, they were like old hippies who like, you know, probably spent a lot of time in their youth there. Maybe not as summer camp kids. A lot of people who did go there as summer camp kids were like on staff, counselors. So it definitely is. It's like an important way to keep the culture. But you know, by the time I was getting out of high school, I knew that I wanted to do something not super directly political. But at that point, I had landed on this idea of urban agriculture as a radical movement and the urban food movement. And so I came up here because this is like, you know, the UMN is one of the only places where you can study agriculture and live in a city. I was definitely not comfortable with the idea of living in a more rural area. So
what years is this that you came up here?
I was up here 2015. So I came up here and like, you know, Jamar Clark, I think was probably murdered by the police weeks after me moving here. And, and so I kind of watched that kind of from a distance because I just wasn't plugged in. To the point that like I knew people who were like going up to North Side. But shortly after that, I ended up working a lot in North Side. I worked with Michael Chaney, who, I don't know, have you guys ever interviewed with him or talked to him?
You know,
I'm sure you guys have probably crossed paths with Michael.
We do. I've known Michael Chaney for many years, first through poetry, and then honestly, his nieces and nephews went to high school with my younger brother, and then I used to work over north at the Y with his niece, and then Michael Chaney was involved in a lot of the Upper Harbor Terminal organizing that spurned this show, you know?
Right. So I did a lot of work with him on a lot of the urban ag projects that he was starting. I really was very into this idea and very inspired by the work that him and other community members in North were doing to like build this, you know, this kind of vision of, you know, an independent, you know, food economy, you know, not relying on outside corporate forces, but really, you know, building like a resilient community that could produce its own food and have economic power that way. So I did a lot of work with youth in North Minneapolis, especially high school students. And I really enjoyed that work. Had a great time cooking and growing food and just hanging out and talking and, you know, having some of these political conversations with young people about their food and you know, what that meant to them and what their community meant to them, and really inspiring. And you know, I throughout that time was following local politics. I really, you know, growing up in Chicago, you kind of look at politics as it's very much like a wall, you know, like my entire like, you know, teenage years, Rahm Emanuel was the mayor of Chicago, which like, you know, we think Jacob Fry's bad, but like, you know, that guy, like, you didn't even know when the police murdered someone in Chicago because Rahm Emanuel was so efficient at just covering it up. So y'all are gonna hate this part, but you know, when I came up here, it was, Bernie Sanders, and was running for president for the first time. And I was an early adopter, and I went to go caucus February of 2016, and the process was so unique. Like, that is not something that ever happens in Chicago. Like, I know that they have similar things in primary states where they do elect delegates and all that, but it all happens behind the you got to have like some ins with one of the families.
It's the machine kind of.
It's total machine, and not to say we don't have a machine here, but it's very different. And so this idea that I could sit in a room and just raise my hand, and then suddenly I have like this, small but not insignificant say in who's going to get elected. I mean, and Ilhan was up for. I had no idea who Ilhan was at the time, but that was Ilhan's first election.
Okay.
And so that was just like, it was kind of very mind blowing to me that was how it worked, and to see like the real potential for grassroots kind of politics and organizing to like actually have a real stake and not just be like some kind of symbolic stand that you take because you don't like Rahm Emanuel or the Daly family or whatever.
Yeah.
That's very different. So I really like that, and I definitely followed along. I have gone to many caucuses. I have a lot of criticisms of
the DFL
of that
caucuses.
system. Yeah. It has its potentials and it has its drawbacks, but we can talk about that later.
Hey,
but,
I you know what I'm saying? I'm gonna bare my soul. I caucused for Alondra Cano in 2016. Damn near on accident. It was my first time ever going to a caucus. I'm just trying to show, you know what I'm saying? Like, I'm better than no one. But it was at South High, and it was my first time really being a part of the process. And I was there more for the park board races. I was there specifically for Londale French, based off some work I was doing then. Some of it connected to urban agriculture, et cetera.
Yeah.
I ended up in the room where you counsel for the city council in the same room, the same caucus, and there was somebody connected to an organization called Kajug, her challenger, who had taken CVE money and just at the time was the worst candidate. So I was like, I could understand what was happening in the room, and I realized like I needed to step over there for Alondra to block him getting a little point from that room. So yeah,
I mean,
it was a learning
not to jump
experience
too much
for sure.
forward, but like that's why like Sheila and I did talk about like what would be the realities of not doing the DFL convention this year. And, this was a year where, because it was all online, like it was so easy, like literally like, usually it takes what? How long were you in that room, Jake, when you caucused for Alondra? It was probably like 2 hours for caucus night.
Yeah, I bet. It was like the whole evening, damn near.
And then, were you a delegate or did you just kind of?
No, I just did that.
But if you're a delegate, then and you actually end up going to the final vote, like it's that's like a 12-hour day. 12-hour days if you go to the one for council and the one for city. So.
Oh, matter of fact, I think I went to that whatever they do that at.
Yeah.
I wasn't a delegate, but I went there, and I remember leaving early and feeling really frustrated, and then realizing like, this is just like
because the first 8 hours of it are just like basically going over the rules and like credentialing everyone in the room to make sure they are who they say they are. And
do they like run Robert's rules in those settings?
Yeah, and it's very confusing,
yikes.
and you need to have someone sitting near you who knows what's going on to explain it to you.
Yeah, and then you realize like what I realized is like, okay, here's these people that were in like student government in high school, did the thing in college, they've been working for the DFL, they're knowing all the rules, and they know, and I was just tuning me out.
I know, I know the general process, but some of these folks who are like really, I guess, parliamentarians about it, like I don't know how they have that capacity. I got respect for them because they can run the show, but
Like get
and
paid.
they're
Are they
usually
getting
pretty
paid?
committed to.
Are you talking about
volunteers?
they're all
it's all volunteer.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy, but they do usually, if they're good, they'll stay out of the actual politics of it, and they'll let the delegates decide. And do their thing. So, but yeah, we talked about like what would it mean to not do it, and the ultimate end result was like, well, we're basically just letting Jacob Fry get endorsed, and when he gets endorsed, I mean, you worked on Robin's campaign, you probably had to deal with the whole losing access to the voter file.
We did,
and that is such a huge thing. So we were like, we need to like block him, and also like because it's so much easier to work. Like we could win the endorsement, and then you kind of have to go into the whole like where are we compromising our values by like aligning with the DFL in that way? I mean, and I will say that the Minneapolis chapter of the DFL, like I know for a fact, most of the people who organized caucus this year are DSA members, you know, and they're aligned on the local level with us. You know, it gets complicated when you go up, and you know, quite frankly, Ken Martin, the state DFL chair, treats the Minneapolis delegation like they're like an unwanted child. So it's a little messy, but you know, I'm not trying to defend anyone, but I do, you know, have respect for the folks who organized that, and I think it was important. Like I don't think Sheila would have gotten 30,000 votes in November had we not been part of that process and had not built kind of some name and some, I hate to say this, but like viability, you know, through that process. I think that's kind of why a lot of people feel like they need to go do it. And I really respect Robin, who said, no, I'm not going to do that. Actually, I'm just going to, and you know, granted, she's running against someone who's never run for the DFL endorsement because he's Green Party. So, you know, but I really respect her for doing that. And I'd be interested to talk with her in the future about it, about how to pull out of that and still, you know, hold a lot of power and a lot of, you know, kind of say in the room, especially early in the election, you know, like how do you start organizing, you know, around other things, I guess, at the same time, which it seems like she did. So
that's really interesting to hear your reflection on it. And like, with all humility, that's like the one real critique I had of the campaign. You know, it's like I was really hungry for a mayoral campaign that would have not only eschewed chose not to go for the endorsement, but ran against the DFL, I think is what we need, you know, in a sense. And like, I do think there's a fundamental incompatibility with socialism and the ruling class parties. And like, I've gone through my same judgments. You know, I participated in the caucus in 2016. You know what I'm saying? Like, I've done some harm reduction votes. I'm not trying to sound preachy, but just the more affirmed I feel is that like we have a completely different project. We have a completely different worldview, and we have to build the organization so that a campaign like yours can make a different choice. So what I respect about y'all are like people who are actually out there going to do it. You're running up against where these ideas come into physical reality. Like if we want to put these ideas into practice, what's the tangible structures there? And so I don't know I didn't mean to just jump in.
No, you're good.
That's a great point.
Yeah, I mean, there's that precedent for Robin too, like running against Cam Gordon and not needing the DFL too. So it's like we haven't had a non-two-party mayor. I don't. Republican or Democrat?
I think maybe
always.
Way back in the day, we did have a Farmer Labor Party mayor potentially, or maybe they were just straight up an independent socialist. But like way back, like 1920s, 1910s, even. Yeah. The Debs era.
Right.
But,
yeah.
Yeah. I mean, ranked choice gives us that more of that opening, I guess, to run that principled independent or third party candidate as well.
I think definitely. Just to get into these reflections and too, like what I was thinking about in terms of like this tangible, powerful stuff that can be electoral campaigns, it's the door knocking and it's the infrastructure building and realizing that if we want to build a left party so that you don't have to run with the DFL, it's like we have to get those infrastructure operations going, even if we're not contesting that very next election. You know what I'm saying? It's like, that's just a reflection I've been having recently.
Yeah, I have not looked into this at all, but should we not be taking inspiration from the write-in campaign in Buffalo? That like,
oh God.
I mean, it's depressing, but like for them to be able to win mayoral with a write-in campaign, like I think that's kind of impressive.
He had like a crazy budget, right?
He's a 20-year incumbment.
Yeah, and he's incumbent.
Yeah, like money, status, influence. I don't think the left has access to that kind of immense wealth, but I do think that's pretty remarkable.
Mm-hmm. I agree. I think that an aggressive tact against the DFL would really mobilize voters. I think what's demobilizing is like coupling yourself with the system, is like tamping down your real vision, your real ideas, your real goals. Like and again, I'm not like all into like the deep election math, so I could be wrong. But just as far as like actually mobilizing people, I really think the DFL is a dead end. It's dead. People don't want it. And I think real ideas about justice and the future and real solutions to the problems we're facing would really turn people out. You know what I'm saying? I think so.
I think especially in Minneapolis, that's definitely true. And I think, you know, when you kind of start getting those moments, like, I mean, Robin really is shaking it up. And I'm really excited to see. I mean, I was hanging out with her last night at the DSA forum, and then we went to Palmer's afterwards and had some genuine fun before you know, we all get back to hard work. I was
so encouraged to see that panel. That was so cool to me to see y'all up there. That's dope.
Yeah, it was something. A lot of power in that room.
Hell yeah.
I felt weird because I was like, of all the people at this table, I'm the one who's like not going to be in City Hall in 2 months. But, you know, we all have our role. And, you know, I mean, okay, so let's talk a little bit about DSA maybe.
Let's do it. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, I guess to talk about like building that left party and that capacity, like I think DSA actually, like I was frustrated, I'm not going to lie, with it at the beginning because I was like, I just want this endorsement. Like, come on, can we just like, guys, can we speed it up? Like, but they were like, no, we're sitting down. We're like, we're working through like what our process needs to be.
That's awesome.
We're creating this, you know, it was super hardcore. It was like 70, 80 questions long. Like,
oh, wow.
You know, they were asking everything. They were asking like, have you ever worked with police? Have you ever, you know, done this? Have you ever done that? Do you own any like private assets? You know, like
real
sorts of
shit.
stuff.
Wow.
Yeah, all sorts of stuff, you know, and it's, you know, I don't, and it's not like these are gotcha questions. I think they just genuinely like want to know, like, what is your relationship to capital? What is your relationship to the system at hand that exists now? And it was very thorough. And then they had, I think, kind of a screening night where, you know, they were gonna they like just, you know, let people come and ask questions for the candidate for an hour, and it was kind of like whatever comes. I remember that being a little crazy because I think a couple people showed up who like aren't. I don't know that they were necessarily DSA members, but it was open to everyone. So, but people were showing up and asking Sheila like really like policy specific questions, and I remember watching. She handled it very well, but I just remember watching it and being like, where is all this coming from? Like, did someone send these people to like mess with us? But they were asking like really good questions, really hard stuff, and you know, I really respected it. And then they had a final screening where, you know, it was kind of right before they were going to take the vote, and you know, they always debate like, you know, oh, like what strategically makes sense. Like, I don't know if we have the capacity for mayor. And then I think the conclusion the membership as a whole came to was, well, if we're going to endorse all these council candidates, let's just endorse the citywide candidate because we can knock for Sheila at any point in time, you know, as we're knocking for anyone else. So, so I really was happy with the slate we had. We had, you know, Jason, Aisha, and Robin, and then Sheila. And, you know, then they went out and knocked. And I was, like, really impressed with that. I wasn't 100% sure what the field program was going to look like. But I actually still don't know because it was an independent expenditure, so we weren't allowed to, like, communicate with them at all. But it was really, really fantastic what they did. Just spending some time doing some deep organizing in those 3 wards. And, you know, I told them last night, I was like, you know, look at the results. Like, Sheila won precincts outright in 2, 9, and 10.
That's awesome. Hell yeah.
You know, and we did a lot of organizing there too. So, you know, it was definitely a joint effort. But, like, you know, it makes me think, like, you know, if we had a group like that doing, like, you know, deep work. And I mean, I think there's a little bit more work. But, like, you know, like in 6 even, which is still South Side and still has a lot of voters who aren't being engaged. You know, I mean, you know, 6 went for Fry and they went no on 2. But last year they voted for Omar Fateh. So, you know, and obviously there's reasons for that, you know, are very cultural.
No, that's just like really exciting to hear that DSA was putting in that work and there was a DSA slate. I really feel like that was a huge missing piece in the city. And I'm really excited to see how it plays out. You know, I think there's going to be a lot of learning moments ahead. But that's just really powerful. Salute to everybody who was doing that work, who participated in all them conversations. It takes that work, you know, and it's like, hell yeah.
Yeah.
So what do you think when you look back at Sheila's campaign? First, I wanted to go back. You gave us your real intro into your politics.
Oh my gosh, yeah. I didn't even talk about how I got this job.
Yeah, how did you get to this position? Like, and why did you?
Okay, so I was on Fate's team in 2020, which I came into because I had just moved into Southside, and I had heard about Fate because Fate had a lot of student organizers when he ran in 2018. He wasn't running as a socialist at the time, but he was like, he let his team unionize. In fact, he encouraged them to do so, was the story. And, he had a lot of young people behind him. And so I had heard about it because I had friends who had been working with him. And I saw, he's running for state senate in my district. I should talk to him. And I ran into him at a DSA meeting, actually, which is very funny. And we got coffee, and I started making calls for him in January 2020. And then, got super involved in the team. They were kind of paying me, it was like a side hustle, basically, to just make calls every night for Fate. And by the time that his caucus convention was over, we were 2 months into the pandemic. And they were like, well, you should just come work with us full time because we have some money now, and we need to make sure that we win in August in the primary. So I did that, had a great time, learned a lot really fast. It was kind of getting thrown into the middle of a lot of things, and had a good time. They got a really good team with Fate, so. But
and that was your first time managing a campaign, working on a campaign.
So I was I guess you would consider me the field manager.
Okay.
I had a lot of roles, but I was basically the organizing manager or whatever, outreach or whatever. So I did a lot of the field management stuff.
Unseated and incumbent.
Yeah. So I guess I have a specialty.
There you go. Watch out. 2 down. Who's next?
Yeah, I know. But Jeff Hayden, it was kind of weird because some people were really mad about it. It was very interesting to see that dynamic. But people really bought the this is a very radical community, or there are a lot of radical communities and working class people in this, Senate District 62. It's the heart of the South Side is kind of how we described it, and you have the A side of the district, which is north of Lake Street, and it's almost entirely renters, and then the B side, it's the Powderhorn folks, Kingfield, people who are very progressive, but sometimes will prefer not to toe the line. So we campaigned really hard. We wanted to make sure that we got the votes on the B side south of Lake Street. So we spent a lot of time campaigning down there, and, still campaigned up in Whittier and all those areas. And, we had a very large team of Somali volunteers who knocked all of the public housing and talked to their, relatives and their families, and made sure they all went out and voted. And, we had huge turnout. Granted, it was 2020, but, for the primary, I think the previous Senate election or Senate primary had 5,000 votes, and this one had 20,000 votes. So we quadrupled the turnout, which, I think we got 11,000 votes in that one, and Jeff Hayden had 10,000. So a lot of people turned out for Jeff. But we turned out more people because we had a really active.
What year was it again?
This was in 2020.
2020, yeah.
Not that long ago.
So granted, everyone's really riled up because COVID, and the uprising had just happened, and Trump was still in office, just being belligerent, and so people were very motivated. But anyways. Get to the point. I was connected with Sheila. I think the first time I met Sheila was in November 2020. It was kind of right around the end of the election and that year. And me and Jason Chavez and some folks who are part of his team, very good friends of mine, we went to this abolition lit drop for Minneapolis that Sheila had organized. I think it was an MPD 150 program, and they had these little zines. They were very nice, little kind of comic books, basically, that were about abolition. They were very nice. I still have mine, and we went and we kind of were dropping them throughout throughout. We went to North Minneapolis to do this. I got yelled at by a libertarian. It was really weird. But Sheila was organizing that, so I did briefly meet Sheila there, and which is a good first impression. Is abolition lit drop, cool.
Yeah.
This is also the day that, I don't know if y'all saw this, but that photo that kept getting posted of Jason, and I'm in that photo, and our friends are in that
Mickey
photo.
Moore was
The one, yeah, Mickey Moore's. Mickey Moore kept dropping this photo that's like me taking a selfie with them, and it says "Abolition lit drop" fire emoji. And I was just like, "Can y'all stop posting this photo of me?" Like,
that's funny.
He's trying
blowing
to
up my spot, guys.
Trying to get
Come
more
on.
excitement for Jason's
I know,
campaign.
yeah.
I think.
Honestly, he campaigned so hard for Jason. It's really no surprise he won.
You gotta like trademark the picture and just get paid off him.
Yeah, for real. Yeah, he does probably owe me some royalties for that. I get officially connected with Sheila a few weeks later because I'm looking for work. I knew that abolition needs to be front and center, part of the conversation. I knew that this question 2, kind of restructuring amendment was in the works and it was going to happen. Obviously there was the first iteration of it that got shot down by the Charter Commission in 2020. So I knew that this was coming, and I was like, I mean, it's funny because I think I was very pessimistic about the chances of a mayor. I was like, well, it's just maybe it's beneficial to just have a council majority that's very pro abolition, or at least in very hardcore deep reforms to the public safety system, and then we can just have a mayor who if everything fucks up we can just blame him. And I was like, well, Jacob Fry's perfect for that. He doesn't have any powers, but then shit got real. The Charter Commission was starting to talk about, well, maybe we should strengthen the mayor's powers, and that was happening already in December and January of that year. And
2021, you're saying, or 20?
Yeah, 2020, December 2020, January 2021. There were the first kind of murmurings about, they started holding those hearings about with city employees to be like, so how much do you hate working for the city council right now? And, so I was like, all right, so maybe I'll give this mayoral race a shot, because I had heard Sheila was running. And so I met with Sheila, and I was pretty straightforward with her. I was like, so do you have a plan for what to do, how to make this happen? And she kind of basically was just like, well, here's the people's budget, and I was a key organizer on this. I brought all these people together, and I'm just thinking how much more could we do with this and then actually get it passed if I'm the mayor and I'm basically providing the oversight and the cover. That was a word people were throwing around a lot. Oh, the city council needs a mayor who can give them the cover to do the progressive reforms, which I'm sure you'll talk about later. But yeah, I was like, all right, this sounds like someone who, has a plan, knows what they can do, where the levers of power are that they can access, and where they can make this work. And I was pretty intrigued. So, and Sheila and I were kind of hitting it off, having a good conversation. So she offered me a job. I kind of told her, it's funny because I told her at the time, I'm not trying to be super, super involved in the election. So maybe just a field managing position, or just field organizing stuff. I'd be interested in that. And she was like, yeah, sure, that's fine. It was so I start basically beginning of January, very early in January. But before that even happens, Sheila had this big plan to announce on December 31st, and Dalal Eid was murdered December 30th.
Yeah.
And so the first time I ever met Sheila was the night of December 30th at the Holiday gas station, where tons of people were gathering, and we were trying to figure out what was going on. And I remember it was very scary because cops were showing up. Yeah. Cops hanging out on the roof of the Holiday with flashlights, and I was like, oh my God, I left after 2 hours because it was also very cold. And it was wild, but I was like, okay, so this is the first time I'm meeting Sheila. Sheila's a street medic. She knows how to handle these situations. It was very cool to see her kind of in in that mode of like, talking to people, figuring out what's going on, like figuring, oh, are you okay? You need hand warmers, all that stuff. So, definitely had a lot of respect for her after that. Was like, all right, I definitely have made a good choice here with who I'm aligning myself with.
Yeah, that's a candidate cut from a different cloth than most of them.
Right, yeah, totally. Like, not someone who's, she really, like, wanted me to know that she was like, I was not ever planning on running for office, so,
Yeah.
Which I definitely respected. So, like, we're, like, 3 weeks in, and we're, like, trying to find a campaign manager, and nobody wants to do it. So she was like, all right, like, do you want to do it? And I was like, yeah, I'll do it. I'm already getting in the flow. I'm, like, putting together all this strategy for how we're going to, like, talk to all these people and get all these votes. And I was like, yeah, let's just go for it. So, that's how I became the manager. It was very happenstance.
Hell yeah.
Which is how a lot of campaigns come together, I'll be honest. Like, it's not always super strategic. It's usually like you find your friend who's really good at organizing, or like just someone who like wants to be involved, and it's like whoever is willing to step up is going to be involved.
It's organic.
Like, yeah.
It's emergent.
Yeah, it's very much so. So. What are you guys? Was that a joke? Are you?
No, it is. I was laughing at the word emergent.
Emergent?
Yeah,
emergent
because it's true. It is emergent.
Yeah.
Hell yeah. Hey, so what do you think? Looking back at it, what are you proud of? What did y'all do really well?
Yeah, honestly, I just am in awe of the fact that we got 30,000 votes. Like, that's more than any of the 2017 candidates, including Jacob Frey, got in their first round.
Oh, are you serious?
Yeah.
Damn.
And, the critical mistake we made was we just didn't predict turnout to be as high as it was. Like, I knew it was going to go up, but my impression was the voter base would be so apathetic after 2020 and so out of it that they just wouldn't show up, even if it was like a kind of big deal. But I was totally wrong. They actually were going to show up way more than before. And so... But I think a lot of the people who showed up who maybe hadn't in the past were people who came for us, which is good. So, in that sense, we did a little bit of the expanding the electorate, that everyone always talks about. So
that's awesome.
But I'm really proud of the team that we built and the space that we built for our team. You've probably heard nightmare stories about what it's like to work on campaigns.
Oh yeah.
And abusive managers and yeah. So I did not throw a stapler at anybody. I did not eat any salads with a comb. Nor did Sheila. Nor did anyone on our team. We were not stooping.
You didn't have to shave anyone's legs.
No, no, just my own. But I was, I'm trans. I guess I didn't say that. I use she, her pronouns to anyone asking. And to have a team that's, predominantly queer organizers and the oldest person on our team was 33 or 34.
Wow.
So just a year or two older than Sheila herself. Who's 32. So super young team. And, we did not let any of that stop us from, and we didn't let the money stop us. We raised, I don't want to make this sound like I'm bragging. We raised $230,000, almost $250,000.
And say that. Hell yeah. That's awesome.
It's crazy. Yeah. It's crazy that we did that. And, we had to work really hard to find those people who were going to believe in us. Managers spent a lot of time doing what they call call time. So sitting with the candidate and making them call just like hundreds of people.
Oh, damn.
Mostly people who have donated to other campaigns and like trying to win them over and get them to, support your campaign. And, Sheila, like,
call time.
I've heard some nightmares about candidates just like refusing to do it. Like, I know for a fact, one of the progressive challengers in 2017, I'm going to be intentionally vague here, he was resistant to doing any call time and fundraising. And so...
why even sign up if you're about to do call time?
I know. It's crazy. I think he really liked doing field and he liked talking to people. He just didn't like asking them for money. So which is understandable. So and he did quite well. So but
sometimes you just gotta get on your knees and do it.
I know, but she, you know, Sheila would joke about like, this is the most I've ever had to talk about myself.
Yeah, so, I bet.
Yeah, which is, you know, true. So it's a mindset shift. So really proud of like just how willing everyone wants to just dive into the work.
That's dope.
And always adjust and always be open to criticism and, you know, willing to shift strategies. And just like be chill about it, you know, and that, you know, I tried to be as gracious as I could with everyone, and I think it paid off because I think everyone had a good time, and honestly, a lot of people told us like, you know, honestly, like I'm not sure that you're gonna win, but it does seem like you guys are having a lot of fun, and I think a lot of people see that, and I think a lot of people really respect and even envy it.
Yeah,
including
Jacob.
Yes, including our mayor incumbent elect. So.
I guess I'm curious. Like after going through it and getting 30,000 votes, which is wild. Do you think there's a path forward for left? Like, I mean, Sheila was like an open abolitionist. Is there a path forward for a left mayor to be elected? Do you think in Minneapolis?
Oh yeah. You can only go forward from there. I mean, you know, because the reality is when you expand the electorate in a municipal year, you're not actually expanding the electorate. You're just getting people who are voters who don't usually vote in that year to go, you know. So it's like these are people who I don't know that the total number of registered voters in Minneapolis increased this year. You know, maybe marginally, like 100 or so, you know.
Okay.
Gotcha. I mean, and you know, granted, like we just came out of 2020, which was a year where everyone was getting, you know, so like we might have capped out for the time being on like how many people can be registered to vote. And I know I've been listening to you guys talk a lot about the electorate and, you know, what that means and you know, who is and isn't in the electorate. And I don't know statistically if the average voter in Minneapolis is still a 63-year-old white man.
Maybe 60
yeah, maybe we're down. I'd hope we're at least down to 50, but
hopeful.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I'm hopeful because like, you know, we had Robin doing like really good, you know, outreach to students.
Yeah.
You know, we had, you know, Jason doing a lot of outreach to, you know, the Latinx community, you know, in you know, that kind of central South Side area. You know, we had Aisha doing, you know, all this outreach to all the tenants in Ward 10. Like, I do think that all paid off, and really,
that's awesome.
You know, and we were involved in all that too. I mean, our specific thing that we really wanted to do was we wanted to go up to North Side, and we did not win a single precinct in North Side. Total transparency. I think there's a lot of reasons for that. I think that's one area that does need to see a lot of growth in terms of how it's engaged, especially in like off years. Off years. Yesterday I said, Jake, you probably heard this, that the off years are actually the on years.
That had me fired up. That had me fired up for real.
Because it's like if you're organizing super hard when there's no election going on, people are going to see it. People are going to want to engage. You know, around. You know, it's like I think. You know, we passed, you know, a you know, rent control amendment. Like we can do rent control now, and that is like there's so much potential to organize around that because, you know, unlike public safety, that was, you know, wards 4, 5, and 6, which is where, you know, I don't know what percent, but a lot of our city's BIPOC, you know, residents live in those wards, and I think that's really what kind of spurred a lot of that participation. So
hell yeah.
The age demographic, like that information isn't out yet, right?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know where that actually comes from. Even,
yeah.
So
I know that they release like their full plan maybe like in a week or so. Like they'll give like a full breakdown of all the numbers.
From the city clerk today that had some info in it that I should probably read.
I'm curious.
They wanted me to fill out a survey about ranked choice voting, I guess. I don't know.
I'm curious. Could you talk about question number 2 on the doors? You know, I've seen in some of your reflections saying like one thing that set Sheila's campaign apart from some of the other campaigns that were even speaking positively about Yes on 2 was having real conversations about what it meant, like sticking to these abolitionist principles of like, we do see a vision of a future without police, and this is a step in that direction. Talk about what you learned on the doors, how that message played. I'm curious to hear how all that went, your reflections on that.
Yeah. So, Sheila is one of the people who wrote question 2, and so she definitely was coming in with a very strong, this is what it means. I don't care what the campaign is telling you what it means or what this mailer told you what it means. This is what it means to me, and this is what I would do with it. And so, we really I think the way I would explain what we talk to people about is we talked about making the material changes to their communities that have not been made or have been taken away even. So real investments into public housing, real investments into youth programs, public jobs, especially for young people. We talked a lot about putting a lot more money into jobs for young people in our park system.
And you're talking specifically when you're dealing with people around the police budget and moving money.
Right.
You're talking about making those types of investments.
And so the second part of that is people would say, well, where's the money going to come from? And, this is where we get a little bit not super abolitionist, but it's what we would talk about is, we spend $10 million a year on PR. And everybody, regardless of whether or not they think their community needs police, knows that PR budget is being spent to lie about what the police are doing to people, specifically how the police are abusing people in their communities. And nobody likes that. And nobody wants that. And everyone knows that's $10 million that's going to a white guy who doesn't live in Minneapolis, who, tried to tell the entire world that George Floyd died of an overdose.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So
that's a strategic move on the doors as far as get into the conversation about defunding by naming specific wastes inside of MPD instead of speaking about it in a general way.
So we talk about the almost $1 million that's being spent on horses. We talk about the $3 million being spent on dogs. We talk about the $10 million or far more than that, actually. The millions of dollars that are spent on surveillance and militarization and SWAT teams and stuff that are only used in the most extreme situations and often aren't necessary at all.
Real shit.
And really just exist, it's extreme deterrence, And when you take all of that, and you take that out of the budget and you start putting it into, funding our young people, making sure that our schools have, adequate funding, making sure that our housing system, is being expanded in a way that, isn't just kind of throwing money at developers, nonprofits, et cetera, but real funding into our existing public housing, trying to combat some of the, the budget cuts being made through HUD and all those federal programs. You can make some real material changes there and really shift the way that people see their communities. I mean, one thing that I reflected on is a lot of people would say, well, I really like the bike cops. And I was like, well, okay, well, why is that? I thought about it a lot, and I think honestly it's a total PR stunt. It's it's if you're in North Minneapolis, one of the few positive images that are touted to you by local media are the nice pictures of all the cops, and they're smiling with the ice cream, and they're with all the happy little kids who are also smiling with their ice cream and playing basketball and whatever, if that's the image that's being pumped to you year after year, I would probably like them too. If that was the only positive thing I ever saw, WCCO say about my neighborhood is, oh, look at all the nice bike cops, I mean, it's propaganda,
It is propaganda.
And it's dangerous, but if someone says they like it, then it's
Whenever I see bike cops, I just think y'all look. Are y'all stopping anybody doing anything? You just look so goofy because they're on them weird bikes and they're over. They got all that equipment on, so they look slow.
Yeah,
sometimes they do. They just look like
so when they need to get off and pursue, they got stop. They got to put down the kick.
Right, exactly, bro. Or you're chasing somebody down on bike. I could see if they had fixies and they were sleek, but it's
the movie
what
Hot
the fuck?
Fuzz.
You're just downtown. You see a cop stallion at a red light or something.
We gotta be locking his back pocket.
Yeah.
Nah. And they always, the bike cops, I'm sorry, I just gotta say one other thing is they move in little flocks and they just look, I mean, they just look very vulnerable to me. You know what I'm saying? It's 12 of them, they'll pull up next to downtown.
Yeah. Well, and apparently there's a big problem where there are not many cops who actually want to be bike cops.
I wouldn't either.
Which
so
is
dumb.
saying something because, I mean, fair point. Yeah, so we talk about, of course, like, here are the programs that we would fund that are like, because we would say like, well, 911 and 311, they would exist. Like there would be a response, if there's a crisis, and obviously like the mental health and the social work. But I've been thinking kind of critically about that element of the plan, because one thing that someone said to me very early, and I can tell you guys who told me this later, and it'll make your minds explode. But someone who's a Northside resident told me, well, I think there's a real flaw in this plan where you're trying to get people to believe that social workers are going to help them. But I'll tell you that my own family has had only negative experiences with social workers, specifically through CPS, Child Protective Services.
Hell yeah.
And I thought about it, and I was like, oh my gosh, like the number of people who I've worked with who have had, on the North Side, who have had negative experience with CPS, and that's their interaction with. So it's very hard. Like I think this goes back to that whole electorate thing. It's like, the electorate is very professional class, and so professional class people, oh, we love social workers. I've got a million friends who are social workers. A bunch of my peers, were studying social work at the U and whatnot. I'm sure that they have good intentions, but like that's a reality we need to confront. That like and this was a big thing that was talked about a lot last year. Is like racism exists in all of these systems.
Hell yeah,
the carceral state exists in all of these systems. So if we really want to convince people that like this is a system that we're going to build that's going to solve these problems, it's like, well, if you're replacing cops who like might rough me up with a social worker who might take my kids from me, like is that a trade I really want to make? Is that making things better? Like people are going to ask themselves that a lot.
I couldn't agree more. In the way they talked about mental health support, that's the same dynamic. That could be like another institution of domination. The same way they talk about sending counselors out to help homeless people without the definition. That's why I was very critical of that campaign, just using those easy fixes that are not really abolitionists. That's a bastardization of the vision. You know what I'm saying? I think like that's not redistributive at all. That's a way to maintain and manage poverty, and that's the difference. Like if you're so I appreciate you raising that criticism, because I shared that criticism, and I think that also turned people off. You know what I'm saying? People are not excited to hear about more social workers.
Yeah, and going off of that, one thing I like wanted to touch on was like, I'm sure you came across a lot of co-optation that came from the right over the course of your campaign, especially with the dual endorsement process. But like with that Yes for Minneapolis component, and the fact that, it was really cynically used from the right that like, oh, George Soros is funding it. But as socialists on the left, we also have to recognize that like Open Society did come out of this anti-communist tradition, and was also like something that should be like a concern, when they're giving $500,000 to this same campaign, and not necessarily writing the language that would have changed the charter, but co-opting that language to create their own vision, I guess, or reinforce their own vision.
Yeah. And providing the staff infrastructure. That's the class basis of a campaign. You can't deny that money. And that sets it up in a professional managerial strata. And it was a nonprofit ran campaign. No one can deny that. That's just the facts. And that was like, that doesn't mean that everybody, there wasn't some great people, abolitionists in there putting in real work, and there wasn't some potential to be pulled this nuanced, but it was a professional managerial rooted campaign that was funded by an anti-communist organization. That's just very true, I feel like for me, it's been interesting. My reflections over these last couple of days is because I've never dove in so fully to an electoral campaign as this year, and talking about it on the podcast, and I want to hold to that and look for the potential in it. And now really remember in 2020 though, in the spirit of George Floyd, and really not getting lost in the electoral sauce, and like grounding myself again in like the realities of the class war and the race war that we live inside of. So I just think that like that reflection is important.
And they also paid the most, didn't they? Yes for Minneapolis.
I think all of Minneapolis and Yes for Minneapolis were paying the same, but
the teachers union was paying people $40 an hour to canvass, so they actually paid, but they were canvassing exclusively for Yes on 2.
That's awesome.
Gotcha.
Which is great. I mean, it's great that the teachers union is doing that.
There's also, I think it's interesting. There's like several layers to analyze pay on a campaign, because there's pay that's coming to canvassers who are out there knocking on doors, and then there's salaries to the organizers who are in the meetings, who are making the political decisions, and that's a real class dynamic inside of campaigns that I'm learning needs to be taken into account as well. You know,
Yeah, that was one very nice. I mean, our canvassing team, not so much was part of it, but a lot of our organizing was pretty horizontal, and we did end up. There was, I'll be kind of transparent about this. There was a time where we were paying our canvassers a bit less than some of the organizers, and they stood up and they said, we would like to be paid the same amount. You know, we're putting in a different, and you know, we had a long conversation about it, and yeah, we gave them a raise.
Yeah.
We said, all right, we'll pay you the same.
I think that's awesome.
So yeah, I mean, you know, it was. That was an interesting point in the campaign, but I was like, well, you guys have all the leverage here, because quite frankly, we're going to lose if you guys walk or or like go online and like say like Sheila is so woke, but her campaign, they're not even paying me the same as the organizer, and I don't know.
Way to use your leverage, workers.
I know. Honestly, I was like, yeah, y'all hold the power here, so let's do it. And you know, it worked out. So yeah, but just to go back, like you said, like easy, kind of naming like the easiest solution possible, and I think like the really hard thing that we do need to talk about is like, I don't know what the immediate response to a crisis situation is, but I do like really believe that what we really should be focusing on way more, and this is not a satisfying conversation to have with someone who's like experiencing gun violence on a daily or weekly basis, but like, you know, like let's like put the resources into your neighborhood that like need to be like it's like you know, it's a stretch to me to be like, oh, let's send a mental health. My mom actually does mental health outreach work, kind of like what we would be, you know, potentially funding under this. And, you know, she works for an organization that does that in Chicago. And she was like, I don't know that I'd want to be like responding to 911 calls. And I was like, fair. But I think like what would be a better pitch is like, well, why don't we have like universal, like the city of Minneapolis should just provide universal mental health care. Like we can do that through our school system, through our park system, you know, whatever is the easiest way to provide that. But like we should, that's really what we should be talking about, is like, we should be, you know, helping people so that there is no like, way before there's a crisis, so that if there is a crisis, well, maybe their family member just can call, you know, their mental health practitioner and, you know, figure out what to do, you know, and get an ambulance if necessary or whatever, you know. But and a lot of this is just like, well, we need universal health care, which I'm not going to, you know, say that the city of Minneapolis is the person to provide that, but the state of Minnesota is, which, you know, or
real shit.
God forbid, the federal government. No.
I think what you're saying is making a very important point for us to reflect on in this moment, though, is because like you can not talk about abolition of the police without abolition of the capitalist political economy. I'm not trying to sound like a, you know, stereotypical communist or to like, you know, look past the history and tradition of the abolitionist movement against the police and white supremacy and paint it with like a, you know, socialist brush. But it's just the reality that they uphold settler colonialism. That's what the police are. That's what the police do. So really, when you're having these conversations, it's going to go there, and you have to take it there with people, and it's not going to win elections right away, you know, but it's the truth about what it is. And that's like, I think, important, because I really do, I don't want to dismiss the need for real mental health care. And I think it would be great if, you know, people who are trained in trauma and people are stepping up on the ground from the bottom up and starting to figure out these services right now. How do you show up for somebody when they're in a mental health crisis? I've had people in my life who've been pulled up on by the mental health team, taking them out of their house and put them into, you know, the state, and the doctor committed them and it saved their life. So I'm not discounting that. I think that's important. I didn't want to sound dismissive earlier, but the reality is, if you're really getting to the roots of the gun violence and the mass incarceration and the poverty and the ills that we're seeing in our society, you're talking about revolutionary change. That's a revolutionary project. And anybody who tries to tell you it's not, that's dishonesty, and it's not reality. It sounds, using the word revolution always sounds like insincere or like grandiose or unserious. I'm a grown ass man with a kid. You know what I'm saying? And it's like, the reality is that's what we're looking at. That's what we're asking for. That's what we need. And we have to like find ways to be able to talk about that are concrete. And I think like the post-election season, hopefully we can have more of those conversations, because there was like those embers from the uprising were in this election season somehow, you know?
Yeah, no, totally. I mean, going back to like the first night of our campaign was, the night that Dalal Eid was murdered. And I remember a few months later reading a story about, I think it was just a long, kind of interview with some of his family members. And, like the whole thing was just like, like they were just like, my brother needed help, like for years. And the state was surveilling him for years.
Yeah.
And never thought to say like, hey, like, do you need help? Like,
exactly.
Do you like, why don't we have a government that does, and like, it's like, granted, like, I don't really want a surveillance state that like, instead of just like arresting you, they, they put you into the right, care facility or whatever. But like, like there's a lot of people who struggle with mental health. I mean, that was something that Fateh talked about a lot. 'Cause it is a real kind of I mean, it's a problem in almost any community, but like a real problem in the East African community where there's still stigmas about it, and a lot of immigrant communities have that stigma, obviously. And that was just something that resonated with people so much. I remember like on election day, like I was walking around Fateh, like just talking to people on the street, and these two Somali guys came up to us, and they were just like, hey, like, thank you so much for talking about like the drug problem in our community and the mental health problem without like othering us. Like, thank you so much, because they're just like, all of our friends have this problem, and like it doesn't feel like anyone's trying to help us. Yeah. And it was like really like sad to hear this. And like I just one thing I really loved about our message was like, Sheila really hammered home on like this, like, like we can build that better world, that more like caring, compassionate world where the things that you need to, it's become like a total trope at this point, but like to thrive, not just survive. Like these things are possible, like, but as you said, like, they're not possible under capitalism. I mean, I even like, I'm sympathetic to so many people. Like I hear, Reverend McAfee and Lisa Clemens, and, I don't agree with what they're doing. But, I hear them when they're saying like, our community needs this, this, and this. We're trying to do this, this, and this, and no one has helped us. Yeah. I feel for the urbanists, as goofy as they can be sometimes when they say that, but like, it's like all these things that everybody wants. Like, I just want people to like start to like look into like, these things are achievable, in a socialist or communist like society. Like, facts. We need to get rid of capitalism if you really want to see this happen. If you really want a government that like steps up and says, yes, let me help your community. Like, yes, let's work together on this.
Absolutely.
Like, Jacob Fry is going to say that forever. He loves to say, yes, I'm going to work with you on this. Like, people like him say that all the time, and it's not true. They're never going to, because at the end of the day, they're going to work with the people who are going to help them keep what they have, and they got to keep the status quo.
They'll meet with people, he'll still meet with people, but he'll waste their time. Like, and that's just like, I think what's more irritating is like, the meeting with no consequence. That's all he does.
Yeah. Facts. And I think it's just like an important orientation as far as I'm really thinking about people who chose to participate in this election season and people who didn't, but people who are tuned in and want this better world and who are connected to the fight. It's like just the consciousness that you're saying. Again, it sounds maybe romantic or something, but it's just, that's a fact that the capitalist political economy guarantees we're going to have this poverty and these conditions. So as we're pursuing various strategies, just having in mind, like, we're pursuing a rupture. We're pursuing something completely different, you know, and just having that consciousness, I think, affects the way you go about doing the work, you know?
Yeah. Kill the progressive in your head.
For real. I listened back to our city council episode. I said progressive like 48 times.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Kill the progressive, leave the communist.
Yes, right.
I'm tired.
I swear to God, I think this.
It was bedtime, but I want to like continue this conversation because we didn't have a chance to talk. I mean, I wanted to talk about Kate.
I'm glad we didn't, honestly. It's, you know, like, I mean, again, like, I hear her, like, she wants to end climate change. You're not going to end climate change unless you destroy capitalism.
You're in Glasgow.
And I didn't hear her say anything close to that once.
Yeah.
It's a joke.
No.
Hey, can I ask you one time, though? Can
Sure.
you reflect on the dual endorsement? Like, I would say this before I ask you, too, is I really appreciated the fact that you posted your reflections on Twitter publicly. I thought it was done in a fashion that was constructive, and I think that's very important in this town. This town can be so insular. People's money rides on being in different positions, so the real substantive political critique that we need is discouraged. What you did was healthy, and, you know, we don't got to get into like all the details, but you know, what's your thoughts on how that dual endorsement strategy went?
Yeah. I understood why people were doing it. You know, we did have a shared goal of trying to get Jacob Frey out of office. That being said, I think that the problem is, you know, the dual endorsement stuff, I think it did really start during the DFL caucus, and I think that the campaign that Sheila and Kate were running, campaigns, I should say, that we were both running were more similar at that point. But then that narrative just kind of kept continuing as, you know, we started to hear stuff like, oh, actually, I want to fully fund police for 2 years. You know, well, we were still saying, no, we like, you know, I mean, we never, this is the funny thing about like being an like we didn't actually use the word abolition, like, you know, in any of our campaign material. We let other people use it for us. We let, you know, journalists want to call us abolitionists. That's fine. It's true. But we didn't present ourselves directly like that. We would talk about police-free future, police-free world, all that stuff. But,
FTP.
right. FTP. What does that stand for? I don't know. For the people.
Would you make that same choice again? Because this is, again, my humble reflection on that is like, if one of the ways the left is to use elections is to take a movement census and get a sense of where our people are. If there's no open abolitionist on the ticket, we have no idea where our people are. And there's a narrative that defund is toxic, abolition is toxic. I think it might mobilize people. A lot of people hate the fucking police, and their voice wasn't really, they weren't really spoken to this election. So do you think you'd make that same decision again?
Yeah, no, I mean, especially now that we have hindsight on like the actual data of how people voted. No, I don't think so. It wasn't worth it. I mean, all of our people voted for Kate anyways, and I think they probably would have had we not made that. I mean, so you know, there was the dual endorsements that like a bunch of the endorsement groups, specifically Take Action, MN350.
Right.
I'm trying to remember if any others did. Clean Water Action.
Basically, like.
Ilhan, yeah. Thanks, Ilhan. I actually was very honored to have received that, and her team was very, very nice to us.
That's cool,
which I do appreciate. But yeah, I don't know that I would have. I don't know that I would do this again. I think it's like what I said. The voter integrity was not the problem. It was really the ideological integrity, and I think to kind of present to candidates as the same when they're not, and then kind of like have this weird like, oh well, just do your research on like which one you like better, and not really like allow any like real room for discussion about like, how are these two different? You know,
if you're bringing up the contradictions or the differences, then you're like a wrecker, or you're helping Fry out.
Right.
And like that dynamic did not need to be created.
Right.
And it's more important. It's not even just about the differences in the candidates. Of course, there's different in the candidates, but what's substantive about that is the difference in the politics, the difference in the visions, and like you can't pursue two contradictory visions at the same time. It doesn't make sense, you know.
Yeah.
I appreciate your reflections on that.
I
think it's really
appreciate your very, very kind words about that, because I definitely saw some people who were not so happy that I said what I said. But I think it did need, because like people just were refusing to say anything about it. And,
I believe we're stronger as a movement when we have open, honest criticism of one another. Nobody's always right. It's good if we make mistakes, only if we learn from them. And as far as like doing this work together, we have to care for each other enough to tell hard truth to each other. And we have all taken hard criticism and we support each other through it. It's like I'm not saying anybody involved in that are bad people, but this is really important stuff. So again, salute to you. I thought that was like a really brave, principled move.
Appreciate that.
Hell yeah.
I'll have to check my Twitter.
Yeah,
check it once a month.
Can I just make a real quick, super vague pitch here? Like,
sure.
I just, one thing I saw like a lot is there are communities that are super organized around radical politics, and we saw where they turned out, where people turned out for that. And then there are areas that have like so much potential. Like I know you guys have talked to tons of EJ organizers, and that's the space I come out of, is EJ in North. And like if you see something going on this year, please get involved with it. Please go up to Northside, work with folks, talk to them about what you care about, hear what they go through, because we got to build solidarity between South. I heard a lot of like kind of like neighborhood like antagonism during this campaign. You go up to Northside and they say, oh, you Southsiders have everything, and then you go to Southside and you see that clearly people don't have everything, like especially in Phillips. Like there's so much in common between Phillips and North, and I do see those two communities working together a bunch, but then there's just other people who don't see it, and even then I'd go to Northeast. And people would be like, well, Northeast we're like the middle child. Nobody pays attention to it. Someone literally said that to me. I was like, I don't know. It seems pretty nice up here, but I do understand what you're saying. Like, there aren't enough buses up in Northeast. Like, I get it. Like, it's true. So, let's build some solidarity across the city, because I think people in every neighborhood are going through the same stuff right now. And,
Real shit. Money.
Power.
Land.
Solidarity.
We need money, land, solidarity. If you funny, stand very far away from me. We have running plans about as far as they can see to keep them coming. Bands building up the company.